Okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming after lunch. And because I was a track producer last year, I get to actually do track producing and moderating at the same time and give our track producers a break. So again, this is going to be a great panel that I will moderate and have some of our great panel experts. So our topic is navigating in the startup jungle. And we purposely chose this title to be provocative. And we actually put this content together before ChatGPT was even on the horizon. So this has become really relevant now because I think all of us as CDOs or CDAOs are looking at how do we introduce some of this technology. But it's not just limited to that. It's how do you really, if we can go to the next slide really quickly, what we want to do is frame the, I can do it, okay. We can really frame the conversation, the audience being, look, if you're a CDO or CDAO, an executive, how do you bring in a startup company into your innovation pipeline, right? How do you get selected? How do you select them? How do you manage the risk? How do you communicate? But we are going to offer a very diverse perspective on it. So both from a CDO, but also if you're a startup as well. And so we've got a great two panelists that are able to bring all that perspective. I get to frame the topic and participate as well, but we're going to cover quite a bit of things, so it might feel like we're going fast. But look, we're here after the session as well if you want to ask some questions. But we thought we would start with first talking about what are the emerging trends in startups and AI and data. Then also talk about different ways that you can engage with a startup. And there are some pretty interesting new models that companies are using. Then we'll talk about, okay, how do you decide which startup is right for you? How do you make that connection, that first connection, and then how do you maintain that connection with the right proper communication and expectations? And then lastly, how do you manage risk? Because in a large company, especially if your company is risk averse, you don't want to have any failures in this, right? So how do you manage risk in a startup with different expectations? And then I will get to wrap it up and do key takeaways. So we'll have, like I said, there's really three of us here in this diverse discussion. I have Ellen Nielsen from Chevron and Graham Brooks from 406 Ventures. I will let them do their own introduction. But this is, I'm very, very happy and proud to be a part of this discussion with them. They're definitely experts in their field. So, Graham?
Sure.
Here we go.
So really excited to be here. I'm Graham Brooks. I'm a partner at 406 Ventures, where I lead our data and AI practice. I've been there 16 years. We're a early stage venture capital fund based in Boston, 1.5 billion assets under management. We're very thesis-based investors, so I spend a lot of time talking to practitioners like yourselves. And then we actually have teams of PhD students that are reading papers coming out of universities and labs. And we really try and sit at that intersection, how to make technology usable and valuable to companies and large enterprises. So I want to start and talk a little bit about where we are. I mean, I really think we're in sort of this golden age within the data AI ecosystem. And the graph up there shows the number of open source repos, and you can see this sort of exponential growth. If you look at sort of the graph of AI and data patents, it actually looks exactly the same. And it also looks the same in the number of new papers that are getting produced. So all this innovation that's happening. And of course, a lot of that innovation, a lot of the sort of large open source projects are happening at large tech companies. But what you're seeing is even at these large tech companies and a lot of professors at universities are spinning out of the universities to actually start their companies. And a good example of that is that all of the authors of the Attention's All You Need paper that kicked off this whole generative AI ecosystem, all of the authors have now left Google. They've all gone on to start companies. And so I think one of the things that you need to think about when you're deciding whether you want to work with a very large company or a startup is, how close are you going to get to the true innovators, the ones that are driving this new research? And I think that more and more, you're seeing those people migrate to startups. So I'm not going to go through these, but I think that obviously generative AI is sucking a lot of the air out of the room, but there are a lot of other areas that we're seeing new startup creation and innovation.
And I would say, right, Graham, that it just seems a lot of companies are claiming to have AI in their product. Whether it's a little bit or a big, it just seems like that's the tagline.
Tremendous.
That we all get when we get emails.
Yes, so I think that is going to be one of the things that you're going to have to work as you think through working with startups, is actually being able to dig down and understand, do they have something that's truly innovative, or are they AI washing their pitches?
AI washing, yeah, that's a good term.
So when I think about how to work with a startup, the real takeaway from this slide is, how do you match the impedance of your organization, a large enterprise, with the impedance of a startup? And that comes in sort of your expectations, their expectations, your pace, their pace. And I think that if you look at that sort of classic crossing the chasm curve that you see there, really decide about where you want to engage with a startup. Now, if we start at the early side there, most startups won't go, or all startups that are really good and innovative won't go to market until they have at least the core of the idea done, right? So if you think about the product that a startup's bringing to market, there's sort of two components. One is this core innovation that's brand new, that's driving new functionality that hasn't been possible before. And then the second is, how do you wrap that core into a usable product, right? It's all the surround sound that makes it fit into your processes, that makes it a really nice user experience, et cetera. And if you're going to be an early adopter, an innovator up there, you have to be willing to work with more of the raw core, because they're going to have the core, but they're not going to necessarily have all the fit and finish of the full product. But that said, the advantages there is that you get to influence their product direction. You get to have direct access to their founding team, these core innovators. The turnaround time of being able to submit a ticket and them killing themselves to fix the product to make it really work for you, it's a unique ability to have that deep connection. And then you might decide that, look, from a risk standpoint, I want to be a little bit more of a later adopter, and those advantages go down, but you still have access to this sort of new and innovative product.
Yeah, and I also see that companies, big companies especially, either have their own venture group, right, that's going, and so the partnership is actually seeding them in addition to just having monies provided. I mean, in addition to just the project side of it as well.
Yeah, so corporate venture is really hot right now, and I think that over the last probably 5 or 6 years, startups have understood a little bit better how to work with corporate ventures. So often when we go to a large enterprise and it's going to be a large contract, involving them in some sort of ownership is a big part of the discussion.
Model, yeah.
Okay, so my name is Ellen Nielsen. I'm the Chief Data Officer of Chevron, and my career is a little diverse, so I will just touch on 2 things which are relevant for this topic. So the one part of my career is coming from procurement. So I have a technical background, but I was doing a lot of procurement. I was responsible for complete IT procurement for a big corporation in the German stock 3030. It's a consumer goods, and I was also leading the global category management in Chevron. That means everything what Chevron buys need to be strategic and need to be sourced very intentionally, right? And so I have a kind of a heart on the procurement side, so I see a lot of things coming into it. So I have a feeling for financial things, commercial things, contractor things, and then of course, how do you do supplier relationship management? So that's the one bucket I have. And the other bucket is, of course, then coming from the data side, being a data officer since 3 years now, and seeing, of course, technologies coming in and seeing how we're engaging. And I'm also a big believer that innovation is not coming from internally. So you have a very good knowledge, but if you stay truly 100% internal, you will not get the innovation. So I think every company knows that you need to look outside of your 4 walls and you have to explore. And every company I was working for the last, I would say 20 years, understood that. So give you 2 examples. My former company, Henkel Corporation, consumer goods company, Loctite, maybe people know this. So they started very early in doing incubation, so they really ventured out. They went even into a different building, pulled different people together, people from the outside, to really disrupt their own operating model and customer model. So, and there are many different ways to do this. So the other story I want to tell, like the AI washing, so maybe a little story to start here our conversation is, maybe a couple months ago, I was approached via LinkedIn, actually a startup, but under a bigger name, and said, yeah, we have here ChatGPT and AI and Gen AI, and we can really clear the data and everything. And I said, okay, what are you talking about? Are you manipulating the data coming from outside? No, that's not what I mean. And I said, okay, what do you do? Yeah, you can now search into your data with Gen AI. And I said, okay, we do this already. So what do you mean? Yeah, it's this and this. And I said, okay, thank you very much, but we have it already. What did the person answer? Can I talk to somebody from your team? Okay. So they think I'm stupid. I felt like really intimidated. But this is kind of the approach I almost daily live, So I just want to bring some light to this. So let's go to the slide here. So deciding which startup is really the right one, So you have to think about what's the intent of a company. And I'm purely seeing this from a company perspective now. So really bear with me, I'm biased. I work for a big corporation and I see the world from this angle. Of course, I can also switch my shoes and see it from the other angle, but just for the purpose of this, I stay in this shoe here. So the innovation is really coming with the intent of growing business. So either you grow your business by creating revenue, or you grow your business by reducing your costs. Very simple saying. There's nothing else. So companies are pretty simple in this regard. So that's always keeping it in mind, how can we do things differently? And you want to grow faster, So you want to take an advantage as a big corporation to be faster and more modern than the traditional way. So what is the leapfrogging aspect here of the things you get from this engagement? Very often in bigger companies, there is a certain point in time where you have to get rid of your legacy systems, right? So we have tons of legacy systems. So what do you do with it? So there's always a decision point. Do you go for another big system, or do you do it in a different way? What kind of business capabilities you want to match, and how does the market is able to match these business capabilities, maybe in a new way. So you start exploring. So, but that's the time where the company is starting exploring, So they get out of the market, they look at the market, you feel that, maybe they're coming to you, they're asking certain questions, they're asking some consultants, you hear maybe something. That's when the time is right to engage also in terms of reducing legacy. Yeah, and then, of course, very often is companies think about more digitizing things, So we, in my company, we have a lot of physical work, So we do still a lot of physical work in Chevron. We go in the field. We always say we do difficult, it's dangerous, and you want to put the people out of the confined spaces, That's the thing. Every manufacturer has done that. So how can I reduce my exposure of putting people into harm? And really reduce that by using digital plus data solutions. So every digital solution comes with a data solution, so that's for sure. And then user satisfaction, that's another thing. It's always coming into mind because typically the older traditional systems are maybe less user-friendly, so we always hope when startups are coming, they have a more the consumer eye, the user experience eye, and that's something where you have to watch. A big component is when you think about which company is right, and I just walk you a little through my brain when I approach this. I had a conversation actually with one of the startups. Is always thinking about how does this work with our ecosystem? How does this work not only in this solution, but I have to think bigger. My plate is bigger. it doesn't help me if I just solve this one thing in finance or this one thing in this. So I have to think a little bit more bigger and have to think about what is the implication, effort, resources of integrating this in our landscape. So, and these are very, very often the first questions I ask when I look for a new startup.
And what I like about this slide in particular too is that sometimes you think about startups from an innovation perspective, you know, something shiny and new, but you're applying that innovation decision to some things that are just really practical, replacing legacy systems, right? I mean, that gives you an opportunity to do something different with a startup.
Yeah, definitely, because you want to understand what's new out there. You have an old view, you know, so you come from a system which is 15, 20 years old. Just replacing what you have is not an option. Mm-hmm. So that's not what the companies are looking for. They're looking for something different. So the next point is I want to talk about making the connections.
And we talk a lot about this
yes,
in particular, making the connections.
So making the connections, a couple of experience share here. In Chevron, we have Chevron Technology Ventures. So we have an own group which is kind of doing the scouting and the things, and they're very purposefully. It's not like I walk out of the door and see what's falling on my feet. It's more about, okay, I have these challenges. We call it, what are the must-win technology challenges we have? And when we walk out of into the world, we have kind of the view, the lens through these must-win technologies. Yeah. We will not see the rest, you know, so there's a lot of noise around it, but we have a kind of a sharpened eye on these are the things we are really looking for. That's a different scouting. It's not just going out and talk to everybody. We are very particularly in looking for. Then you work with innovation centers, with labs, academia, other partners you have. And I was very grateful just on Monday to be invited by Eileen Vidrine, who was the data officer of the Air Force, to get a tour into the MIT lab. So they have an accelerator lab, AI accelerator lab. They're running this since several years now. And these are the kind of partnerships you can enter to tap into very innovative knowledge, you know, and also be not, let's say, limited by the existing walls of the government, you know. So you're a little bit freer, you can explore very interesting things happening. And then the question is also, can others also chime in and help, and what can you transition out of this into your world? So the other maybe words I have here on the connection is a little bit because I'm in pain. I have pain, yeah? So I have pain if people are approaching me and say, okay, do you have just 5 minutes? Please go to Calendly here and schedule something.
Yeah,
that's the best, right?
Yeah. Go to my calendar and choose the time I'm available.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is really painful. I always, when I take the phone call, they call me now on my private phone, they call me on my work phone. And they say, yeah, we are here, company so-and-so, do you have 5 minutes? And I said, I'm very sorry, I'm not, are you a sales representative, business development, are you a company? Yes, but we are not, I'm sorry, I cannot, if I take you, I do not do my work. So, and that's something you will not go through the door. So, and I think I'm not the only one doing this. I was told I'm friendly. So, because I still talk, others just hang up. You know, I say, I'm very sorry, but I don't take your call. Yeah, and these are very different approaches I get via LinkedIn, via email, and I tell you what works. So what works is when you do your analysis, you really do your research. You understand the customer you're approaching. So what I hate specifically is, I'm not a bank, right? Chevron is not a bank, not that I know of. But when a company approaches me and say, hey, we have here the top financial banking solutions, and do you want to schedule an appointment? You have not done your job. So do your job. I mean, we have ChatGPT now. You can ask all the kind of things. What has Chevron done? When they have decided, when they have made announcement, when they go with certain decisions into the market. So you find maybe much more stuff than you think. and you can do your homework and your research and then be a little bit more pointed with what we maybe need and what might be interesting for us. So, and bring real examples. What I personally always like is make a short statement. Say, okay, we have here an offering. We believe it's in your sweet spot. Just saying, let's say we have here a carbon footprinting solution for so-and-so, and send a little video. You know, what are we consuming at home? We watch very little videos, right, to get a glimpse on what it means. So send little videos. Don't make it too technical. Don't make it too high level. I don't want to see any kind of high-level PowerPoint slides because we know all that stuff. We are all very knowledgeable. So give it a good touch of, this is the sweet spot we are handling. This is where we are. And then you get attraction because I have time to watch maybe a little video at my discretion at the time I have. And then I say, oh, that might be very interesting. And this is how I make connection, you know. So I think an example was yesterday, you know, when we had a dinner together, and one of the startups said, okay, this is what we do, and this is how we do it, and it hit a sweet spot, so we had a follow-up, you know. So I think you can make connections, right?
Yeah, I think your organization makes great connections.
Well, I was going to add sort of one to-do and one caution, I guess, from the startup side on the making connections. One is if you're looking for innovation startups in a certain area, find a venture firm that focuses there, because we as a firm meet with about 2,000 different companies, and we spend a lot of time sorting out the ones that we don't think are going to last. And so if you come to me and ask for, like, I'm really interested in this space, I can give you the 10 companies, maybe one from our portfolio, but the 10 others that you should look at really, really quickly. And then the other thing that we see often with startups is centers of excellence, right? From our perspective as startups, those are often big red flags, right? Because we see a lot of centers of excellence kicking a lot of tires, wasting a lot of time with startups. And for these early customers, you really only have a couple bullets as a startup. And so, I think really trying to, as Eileen said, connect that business problem to what the startup's doing, that's critical, and doing that sooner and making that connection to the business unit sooner is going to be the recipe for success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, also be realistic, what you have today. I think that's what you also always say. Be realistic where you are right now. Don't blow it up too much and say you do everything and then you do a follow-up call and then you're surprised that it's only 40% or so.
The minimum viable.
Yeah, exactly.
Very minimum.
So be realistic, say, okay, we are maybe not ready yet, maybe in half a year. I think that's always better. Companies are not in a rush. And then the last part we want to touch here is where is our head in terms of managing this? When you come together and you found a common ground where you want to explore, really be very good in defining what are the deliverables. So sometimes we are all both so excited, that we say let's start and figure it out. But it's always good for both parties to say, okay, what is the expectation and what are the clear deliverables behind? Sounds a little bit maybe antiquated to define this, because in Agile we want to be more fluid, but really make sure that you hit these things at the right time, and because that's how companies work. They want to have a roadmap, they want to know when things are finished, and that's how we think. A big component when we enter into relationships from a corporation standpoint is there's always resource commitments. So always. There is not one single engagement I ever had where there was not resources needed from both sides. And it's never like, oh yeah, just give it to us and we handle it. You always need some people from the other side to explain the context and the relationship, and let's figure that out, what the realistic view on the resource is. Be also not discouraged when things are stopping at a certain point in time, because there might be shifts in priorities ad hoc from a company. So that happens pretty often. You're on a track, you're in the third month, and it's really running well, and then the company, something happens, and the priorities shift. So some of the resources leave for a little bit and maybe come back later, but you want to just continue, as a startup, you want to continue, finish it, but there might be a breaking point in between. So This happens pretty often, so don't get discouraged by that. Make realistic assumptions on when do we come back, be good about it, you know. So I understand you have shifting of priorities. How can we pick this up again? And what's the realistic time for this? It happens quite often. One showstopper is cyber. If you have no, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely, right? If you haven't really thought about that as a startup working with a large corporation, that could be a nonstop.
Yeah,
right?
you don't get out
Full
of the gate
stop,
at all.
right,
yeah.
right.
So I know you cannot do it all as a startup at the beginning, especially when you're just a couple of years in the journey, but you have to have an opinion. You have to share this
roadmap,
opinion in a
right.
second
Yeah.
with these companies, because if they say, yeah, we give it later, then we know you are not ready. So have your opinion, your practice, what do you do in cyber? And I tell you that the cyber threats, as the big companies are pretty well managing this. So I think all the big companies are managing this well. Where the threats are coming today is from third party. So it's not about us. It's about somebody else using something with us, for us, or in any way. So, and this trend is going up this year, doubled. I'm just saying this, so it doubled that. So it will be even more important that you have an answer on this coming forward.
Yeah, and I would add probably privacy as well, right? That if there's a privacy component to the startup problem that you're using, they've got to be able to address it, right?
Yeah. And we had several examples. One example was we onboarded in the lower carbon space, a software part, and we were very optimistic. We went live. We were promised things will happen, will go in the pipeline. It never happened. So after 6 months, we had to shut it down. You know, so you don't want to invest all the time. You come to that far and you cannot deliver, and then it's painful for everyone. So be realistic there too. I skipped the sandbox here. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. You don't want to put it in a big company production line. You want to do it in a sandbox with a very good case, make a proof of concept, and then venture out from there. Technology agnostic will become more and more important. Why I'm saying this, it's also a data component. You know, when we did, for example, this lower carbon thing, then we defined some data models, and we defined these data models agnostic to whatever we wanted to do later on. And that was the case where we had to pivot to a different solution, and we had the data in a second ready because we had it kind of agnostic done. So think about the companies didn't want to be locked into proprietary system where they cannot get out anymore. It's very open. I mean, open AI, open everything. So we want to be kind of flexible on what's coming up. Yeah, implementation in stages. So know what you can eat on the time, and go in stages, and then keep it very straight with the talk. So honest conversation is the best conversation you have. Early bad news are very good news. So I always say early bad news is the best you can do, and it's actually a good news, and then you can work from there.
Last slide. So let me just bring it and wrap it up for all of us here. So first, the key takeaway is, look, there's a great opportunity now. I think our companies have more appetite for some of this innovation, and there's a lot of offerings out there. So it's good to have both the supply and the demand almost at the same level at this point, right? And the other interesting part is that there are various partnership models that you can look at, and that's what Graham talked about. There's not just the traditional, you bring them in for software development in only one way. I think Ellen talked about, and this was really important, you have to have a cause, right? A reason for bringing them in that you've thought through, right? And most, if you're a startup in the room, you should understand that there is a point, there's an outcome that's required, there's probably a roadmap, there's intention. And so that really feeds into the third point, which is to establish effective communication. I agree with you. I get so many requests from startup companies, And they obviously have not done their homework. They don't know who I am. Their data is wrong about me oftentimes, right? And I will try to be also kind because I understand everybody has a job to do. But at the end, I will say, and please take me off your contact list. So that really kind of seals the deal. You don't ever want that if you're a startup, right? Don't take me off your contact list. So do your homework. Spend a little bit of time knowing these executives. A lot of data is out there about executives. So do your homework and then follow it through with being straight, setting the right expectations. And by the way, I think the other thing that's important as a CDO is you set the expectation with the startup company, but all the company needs to have the right expectation. You have to communicate, I'm working with a startup on this particular thing, and we are going to have to manage it a bit differently. I think the other thing I learned from Graham and Ellen was that you can overload a startup just like you can undersource them. They will come with everything they got to help you, right? And so you got to match them where they are too. But I know in our case in SAP, we can overload and overwhelm a startup as well. So I think this point of kind of both groups have to come to a happy conclusion about the resources and set the right expectation. And then again, there are going to be risks. That's the whole point. There will be some risks. Identify those risks, mitigate those risks, have straight talk, and you'll be much more successful. Okay. With that, I will turn it to the moderator.
Very good. We're officially at time, but perhaps we could take a couple questions from the audience here. If not, I do have some Zoom questions that came in. Yes.
Hi, this was really, really great. So my question is from the other side. So if you're one of the big companies like you guys, and you haven't gotten to the point where you're having the conversation and you're doing the evaluation, you're getting an inbound email, and you want to have a very quick algorithm of deciding, is this worth a conversation, right? Is this worth a follow-up? Because there's, I appreciated all the things that you guys have said, and hopefully some of the startups are listening, but I think we probably hit less than 0.001% here. So they'll still keep coming, right? Yeah. So what's the smart way? Because at the same time, we want to actually engage, and a lot of innovation and value comes from this, right? So is there any advice to people that are running big firms that gives you a very quick filter to go on LinkedIn page, ask yourself these 3 questions, and then decide whether it's worth responding? Thank you.
I'm not sure if you have a filter for every case. So when I have a filter, let's say I have a filter for, I'm just mentioning data quality, yeah? Then I have maybe 3 things I'm looking for. Yeah, so we have business needs. Can I cover the business needs? Is my data safe? I don't want to copy anywhere data. And then the third one is maybe, okay, what kind of scope has this company and can it be integrated in a smooth way? So, but I think case by case, it might be very different. I don't think that there is kind of an overlay. I was actually had a business idea, so is there kind of an algorithm which can screen everything and just basically, hey, Ellen, so you are looking, I read your mind, you're looking for data quality, and these are the new things, and this is kind of, you can leave this out because I put in ChatGPT, kind of don't copy my data and so on, and I get this out. That would be perfect. But I think the data outside from the large language model is 2021. So we have to upgrade that to 2023 because the world has moved on. But that would be a perfect solution for all of us, right? To screen a market and to get kind of very quick, narrowed down, this is the area where you are looking at. That would be perfect. So if a startup wants to take that, that would be great. I would be a subscriber.
I think for me, I just don't respond to mass mailing. I mean, so no email really does it for me. I have to have had some connection, right? Graham calls me, or it's something else, Wilda Ventures that we're involved in, or some. It just can't be, because usually that cold call email is wrong about me. So you'll say, oh, we know that you work at SAP and you do X, Y, Z. No, I do not. So why you got that info? So right away they discredit themselves. So I do kind of count on Graham and his organization or other colleagues that are doing that. So it makes it hard for the startup for sure. But that's why I think working with a venture capital team helps, and having a network that helps. You're more likely to have that first customer be in your network.
And what do you, what do you do if it's a friend of Joe who's your next door neighbor? So you
Yeah,
can't really
I'll
pass
take the
it
call.
along.
Yeah, if it's Joe, I'll take the call. That might not take the second call, but I'll take the first call.
Excellent. Great topic. Unfortunately, not enough time, but encourage people to come up
Oh,
afterwards
and
interact with the panelists
One
here.
thing, and
Please.
for those of you who are still hungry, at the SAP booth, we now have cannolis. So please stop by and get the cannolis, but not before I do, though.